Chapter 17. What happened to him? Rose looked up.
Jinn are an interesting species. Because of their ability to dematerialize and teleport, they are vulnerable to being bottled, so to speak. He will be trapped, suspended in time and space, unaware that he is inside a box and unaware that time is passing, but still imprisoned and unable to free himself.
How do you keep others from opening the box and letting him out? Surely she didn't just plan to put that little box on a shelf somewhere, like a trinket to display.
Only a Llamasu can open or close a Quappa box.
She turned to face the large stone disc behind her. At first glance I had thought it was a round stage. Now I could see it was much more. Rose reached down to touch one of the marks on its edge. All the glyphs around the disc's rim glowed gold, and the stone began to turn. Pieces rumbled from its center and the middle began to drop, creating a stairwell into the earth. The edge of each stair glowed with the same ethereal yellow-gold light.
This is Sanctuary's vault, Bailey. This is what Darius hoped to find, using you as leverage.
She stepped over the edge of the main rim and down a couple of stairs.
Come.
I glanced up at Erick. He nodded and urged me toward Rose. I stepped over the rim and followed her down the curved, eerily glowing stairwell. We went at least 3 flights before I stepped into a cavernous room. The ceiling soared to 14, maybe even 20 feet high. The walls were stone, carved with amazingly detailed reliefs of dragons and other winged creatures I couldn't identify, scenes of battles, scenes of throne rooms. And at the end of the room, a painting depicted one of the most beautiful cities I could have ever imagined.
"Where is that?" I pointed.
She smiled and walked to a stack of black boxes very similar to the one she held in her hand.
"It was my home after being cast from Vale. The great city of Babylon was one of the most beautiful places on earth before its destruction."
Her voice carried pain and longing. Even now, after so many thousands of years, I could tell she still considered that ancient city with a lot of love. I glanced around the room a little more. Lamps hung from the ceiling, bathing the entire room in a soft glow. Stacks of those little black boxes were everywhere. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them. Do they all have a jinn inside them? Rose turned back to me.
"Yes, most."
"He said you locked up his wife." She ran her fingertips across another black box.
"Yes."
Then walked a few paces and sat on a gilded high-backed chair.
"Come, sit with me."
I joined her, taking a seat in the chair next to her. When I looked up, the painting directly in front of me was of a terrible battle. Bodies were strewn everywhere. Walls were crumbling. As I looked closer, I saw familiar structures from the painting of Babylon across the room. This painting showed the fall of her home. My heart clenched in sympathy for what she must have gone through.
"We are at war, Bailey. A war that started millennia before you were born. So many years have passed, but I can still smell the fire, feel the slick on the streets as I ran through the spilled blood of my family. Only 3 of the sentinels escaped when Babylon fell to the horde. My husband Naram, his brother Xerxes, and myself."
She crossed her legs and leaned back in the chair.
"We didn't know until much later that Xerxes was the betrayer. Naram and I watched our families and friends die, fighting to give us a chance to escape with the sisters. They were our responsibility and the crown jewel of the city, the reason it was so great."
"Why didn't they see the war coming?"
Rose sighed. "They cannot see Llamasu. Our magic supersedes theirs. Anyone we collude with is also shielded."
"The jinn were working for your brother-in-law?"
"Yes."
"Why?"
"He freed their king, or so we assume. My race imprisoned him thousands of years ago. Xerxes let him out."
"And after all these years, they still owe him?"
Rose shrugged. "I'm not entirely sure. It is most likely they now fight because they must. Xerxes has a way of creating leverage. Over the centuries, I have decimated their numbers. There are only a few hundred jinn left free on the earth. if they hope to survive as a species. She gestured around the room at the thousands of jeweled black boxes. Xerxes is the only other being in the world besides me who can free their people. I was trying hard to understand it all. Why does he want the sisters? To sire children with them. Xerxes could have a child with one of them? A son? With powers? Yes. Not only could he have a son, he could have a Llamasu son with powers of premonition. It could add an entirely new and powerful ability to our species. The sisters are the only beings on Earth, other than the Llamasu, with whom he could father a child. Meaning Rose and Xerxes were the last of their kind. They look so normal. Doctors would be unable to tell the difference, so we allowed the misinformation to perpetuate. It's less complicated for everyone. So they're not human at all? No, Rose sighed. In fact, humans are not allowed to live in sanctuary. It's too dangerous. But you let me stay, I gasped. I knew who you were, Rose replied. Arlia saw you in another vision the day before Erick arrived in town with you. Rose met my gaze, and I waited for her to go on. When Erick called from the bus and told me he was bringing you to Sanctuary to stay with him... Wait. He knew I was supposed to be this protector from almost the very beginning? Holy shit. Rose's eyes widened. If you are doubting his affection, don't. I've only seen him care for a woman one other time in his life. Believe me, he would move mountains for you. In fact, he challenged me for your right to walk away if that was your choice. Wow. My brain spun under the weight of the new information. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the wall. My forefinger rolled the signet ring on my thumb. I'd forgotten it was there. You should probably keep this here. I removed the ring I'd taken from Darius and placed it in Rose's hand. Tears made her eyes glassy, and she closed her fingers around the ring. You got it back. Thank you. She got up and walked to a small table a few yards away. A jeweled silver box sat centered on it. She opened it, kissed the signet ring, and then placed it inside. I never thought I'd get that piece of him back. When I saw it on Darius's hand, it was like losing Naram all over again. I do want to stay, Rose, and I do want to help the sisters to be free from Xerxes. I know I don't understand everything that's going on yet, but I can learn. I've never felt more at home than I do here in Sanctuary. The people who live here care about each other. We are a family, in a sense. She turned back to face me, leaning against the edge of the table. Even though in other parts of the world certain others wouldn't deem it safe to be within 100 miles of one another, we found a way to coexist and have become stronger for it. I looked past her to the wall behind the table. Another large painting hung on the carved stone wall. A landscape so beautiful it took my breath away. Lush forests, mountains, and buildings unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth. They had spires that must have reached thousands of feet into the heavens, giving the residents of them the amazing sense of living among the clouds. She turned and looked up at the painting as well. The Vale. The original home of the Llamasu, of all supernaturals. Why aren't you there? I asked, not able to imagine why anyone would want to live in Texas if they could live there. Calliope had mentioned Vale, but her description paled in comparison to this painting. The Llamasu were driven from the Vale by the Dracone long before most other supernaturals became trapped on Earth. The House of Lamadai, she pointed to me, the Protectors. All of this will ultimately be our way home to Vale. If all the dragons took over Vale, how did Miles and Eli end up here? Rose shook her head. That is not my story to tell. I wanted you to see where we come from, why this town is so important to us, why we protect the sisters at all costs. They are never allowed outside the castle. With Miles and Eli's aid, Xerxes can't get inside either. Is he scared of dragons? Rose's face split into a grin. Very. She motioned toward the stairwell. Dragons are the Llama Su's only equal in size when shifted, and we can both fly. Llamasu have more magic, but dragon physiology creates a natural shield against it. However, their true advantage lies in their breath. Dragons are either born of fire or ice. Miles and Eli are both fire dragons, and one Llamasu against 2 fire dragons would be suicide.
That's why he keeps sending jinn.
She sighed. He's trying to steal one of the sisters.
I stood and followed her up the stairs. Calliope said I should ask one of them to breathe fire for me. I heaved one foot in front of the other and peered up the seemingly never-ending stairwell. Honestly, I thought she was kidding, I added.
It is an amazing thing to see. Perhaps one day they will show you.
Do any of you in town ever shift? Rose paused and looked back at me. I could see sorrow in her eyes. It haunted me, sending an icy chill across my already cool skin.
I haven't shifted in nearly 1,000 years. With the advances in technology, it's just not safe. Some here are able to shift regularly. Wolves aren't a red flag to anyone in the country, but they have to be careful about the ranchers in the area. Many of them are trigger-happy, even if their cattle haven't been disturbed.
She turned away and began climbing again.
Most of us hide in plain sight, trying our best not to draw extra attention to our existence. Even though the Texas Republic favors others right now, there's no guarantee it will remain so.
Made sense, I thought. Still, I wondered what a Llamasu or a dragon really looked like. It would be amazing to see them in their element. Scary for sure, but I couldn't imagine that it was anything short of breathtaking. Having all that power locked inside for so long must be excruciating. But they were right to do it. If people knew there were beings like them walking among humans, it would be the riots all over again. Maybe worse. I ran my fingers along the stones as we climbed. The golden glow slowly faded, and I saw the light from the moon above flooding the stairwell. We stepped clear of the vault rim. Erick, Calliope, and several others stood a few yards away. The stone covering began moving again, closing up and returning to a solid, smooth disk. I stared carefully, searching for a crack or crevice that showed where the parts fit together. Amazing. I ran my hand over the smooth rock, tracing along the markings decorating the edge.
Magic, Rose whispered. Speaking of which, would you like to see the sunrise in a few hours?
I nodded and smiled up at Erick, who had already moved to my side. He slipped an arm around my waist and squeezed me against his hip. I loved being close to him. His touch filled me with longing and comfort at the same time.